They have 8 medical examiners now on staff. Wouldn't that be great? Lewis County. As again I said, we are a coroner system. I'm the elected coroner. Right now I have a staff of 10, including myself. So the coroner position is half-time. And I have 1 chief deputy coroner who's full-time, and then I have a staff of deputy coroners who respond on call from their homes whenever a dispatch comes in. So between the 10 of us, we handle 2,000 square miles and approximately 75,000 people. Right now, we're up to about 500 deaths since January. So, if I remember my stats correctly, I believe it's 4 homicides. For Lewis County, that's a lot. 4 homicides, 7 suicides, 7 traffic fatalities, 6 accidentals, a smattering of drug overdoses, and the rest are naturals. You folks, how many people here from Thurston County? There you go. Gary Warnock is a very good friend of mine, the Thurston County coroner. You guys are averaging, it was 1 suicide every 6 days for a period of time. The suicide rate here in Thurston County has gone extremely high. And I asked him if he had any idea why, and he didn't. But that's just a statistic from where you are. Centralia. Centralia is our biggest city. That's 17,000 people. Yep, we're a small county. I live in Chehalis, the next town over, that's 7,000. The rest are all small towns and a lot of rural area. We have a lot of what we call the east end of the county. If you go down Highway 5, I-5, take Highway 12 out to Randall, Packwood, that's all Lewis County. We go up as far as the ski lift on White Pass. If you go up through Highway 7, up through Morton, there's 1 housing development in Ashford, which is actually in Lewis County. The rest is in Pierce County. So we have a lot of rural areas. We get a lot of, I'm trying to get the commissioners to ban people owning dogs in the East End because they go into the woods and they dig up bones. And then they bring them home and they turn out to be human bones. We've got, I believe, 3 open cases now of human remains found within about 2 weeks of each other out in the woods down in the east end of the county. So that gets to be a little exciting when you're out digging in the middle of the night. Basically, the coroner does 2 things, or is responsible for doing 2 things, and that's determining the cause and manner of all deaths reported to them. So a cause of death is just that, anything that led directly to the death, and that could be numerous. We could go around the room and everybody give me an example and we'd be here all day. So 1 quick example of cause of death could be heart attack, gunshot wound, hanging, cancer, stroke, anything that led directly to the death. And then the coroner has to determine under which category any of those deaths fall, those causes of death fall. And there are only 5 categories of death, and they're called manners of death. And they are natural, which is the disease process, homicide, which is the intentional or the taking of one human life by another. So animals cannot commit homicide. So it has to be one human being killing another. Suicide is the intentional taking of one's own life or participating deliberately in an act that a reasonable person would know could lead to death. So if you're sitting here and you're playing Russian roulette, where you take 1 bullet out and put it in the cylinder and spin it and put it to your head and pull the trigger, if I ask you how many people want to do that, you'd be like, no, because it could hurt me. So that is a reasonable person. Someone playing Russian roulette, families have argued, no, it's an accident. No, they put a loaded gun to their head and pull the trigger. So even if there is no intent to hurt themselves, they're deliberately participating in a behavior that could lead to death. There's accidental, which is there's no intent whatsoever. So for example, you go bungee jumping. I believe I'm not bungee jumping because I'm a reasonable person and I know I could die. But that wouldn't fall into the category of suicide because there's all these fail-safes and things that are supposed to happen. And the last is undetermined, which is something we try not to use very often. That is when we have absolutely no idea what has led to this person's demise. So basically a lot of that you get on skeletal remains. Now we'll have our anthropologists do the head to toe, and they can tell if there's been a stab wound through and hit the bone. They can actually tell. They can tell if a bullet's gone through the bone. But if we get skeletal remains and cannot determine, then exactly that. It remains undetermined. Again, it's not something coroners like to use very often. So now you ask me, how do we determine cause and manner of death? And the way we do that is by conducting what's known as a medical legal death investigation. And just as the name suggests, We are looking at the medical and legal aspect during the investigation. So the medical is, we're looking to see if the person has any medical history. Do they take any medications? What type of complaints were they experiencing? Were they at the hospital? Have they been to the hospital? We have Providence Centralia Hospital down there in Centralia is so good. If I sent a fax request for medical records, by the time I get back to my office, usually the records are already there. It's a great system, and we review those records, because if I've got somebody 65 years old and they're at home and the family said he hasn't had any complaints, there's been nothing wrong with him, and we found him passed away on the couch, and now I look, yeah, he's being treated for congestive heart failure, hypertension, diabetes. It's like, whoa, all right, yes, there is something wrong with this person. There may not have been this particular moment, but in my eyes, it's not raising red flags, making me go, I wonder. That's the medical side of it. We also impound all prescription medications at the scene, and then we dispose of them with the sheriff's office. The legal side of it, we are not police officers, we're not sworn or commissioned peace officers, but we work very closely with law enforcement. So how it works basically is someone finds somebody, they call 911, aid goes out first, aid and fire and EMS, and then in Lewis County, if they're not transporting, they call law enforcement calls us. So we may get out there, maybe an obvious homicide, or the manner of death may be obvious, but we deal with law enforcement. But no, we're also have to be very aware of the legal aspects, such as search and seizure, because we're in someone's home most of the time, and chain of custody, and that includes the decedent. And that's a word you should hear from forensic professionals. We don't use the word body, we don't use the word corpse, especially when you're talking to family. You know, well, ma'am, we're going to take the body, the guy you've been married to for 50 years. No, we call him the decedent. And in many times when we're dealing with families, if Mary is the surviving spouse and, you know, Fred's on the floor, we're going to take Fred. We talk to him that way. So, but the legal aspect is still, if I'm coming in to investigate a death, the homeowner still has the same rights and privacy under Fourth Amendment as anyone else. So we have to be familiar with all that, what evidence is, how we look for it, how we collect it, chain of custody. So those are very big issues that you have to be aware of. So how does a medical legal death investigation start? Just like I said, we get called to the scene. So we respond to the scene. And I said I have a staff of deputy coroners. This past Saturday night, midnight till Sunday midnight, I was in. So we're shorthanded. We have 2 guys on leave of absence and 1 just got deployed. So we're short. So I'm a coroner who can jump out in the field and do calls as well, and I still enjoy doing it. But we respond to the scene. The first thing we do is conduct interviews. We talk to the law enforcement. What did you see? What do you have? Who's the decedent? What did you see? Anything out of the ordinary? Then we meet with the family. We explain who we are, why we're there, what's going to happen, and we get their story. We will interview witnesses. We'll interview anybody who's got something to tell us. And that all gets documented. Then we document the scene. We do photographs of the entire scene. We also do photographs of the decedent. Then, this is where our speciality comes in, because no one by law is allowed to touch the decedent except either the coroner or medical examiner staff. So detectives aren't out there palpating, they're not looking, it's our folks. So I have raised the standard since coming into office, and I want all of our deputy coroners to be known as forensic body experts. They know what they're looking at. We're working very hard with law enforcement to get there. They will do a complete head-to-toe exam. They glove up, they have all the protective gear they need, and they will palpate and look and probe and do whatever they need to find and document every little mark, right down to a little tattoo in the web of the thumb or an old surgical scar next to the knee. Everything gets documented with photographs. Then we're looking for any evidence that's on the decedent. So the evidence at the scene should be collected by law enforcement, but we may find hair and fibers. We use alternate light source on a hand, and human hair will pop right up on the fingers. So we'll stop what we're doing. We assist in the collecting. We have to maintain chain of custody of that decedent in criminal cases, which means bagging their hands, sometimes bagging the head, putting them into a body bag and securing that with a seal, so that the next day we can document everything that we found during the exam was on there, so someone can't say, well, how do we know someone didn't sneak in the middle of the night and plant this evidence? We arrange for the transportation of the decedent. In our jurisdiction, we use a mortuary. Here, they have their own removal vehicle. So we use a different mortuary every month on a rotating basis, and they transport back to our office. Then the deputy is responsible for writing a comprehensive investigative report that describes everything. If I handed you one of these reports and you had no idea what the case was about, when you're done reading it, you'll know. You'll know when the person was last seen, by who, what they were complaining of, when the deputy got the call, when the person was found, who responded, fire, everybody. Everybody is in that report. The photographs are attached to that report. And then after that, just follow up, because we are also required by law to protect the decedent's property and to notify their next of kin. Now that sounds easy, but some of these cases, the next of kin is in the next state or don't live right with the person, so you actually have to go out and knock on the door and do what we call a cold knock. So maybe 3 in the morning after you leave the scene of a traffic fatality and you're knocking on the door to tell parents their children aren't coming home. That's not an easy job to do. And it's something you do, the more you do, the better you get at it, but you don't ever get to like it. Because it's not, that's one of the hardest things you have to do is deal with a parent who's lost a child. And that doesn't matter, I mean, we think of child as little, but I had a woman who was 97, I believe, and her son was 71, and he was married, had kids, and ended up living back home with her in his later years, and he passed away, and it was as difficult for her as if he had been 3 days old. So it's a very emotional toll that can take on people. Where am I here? Oh, all right. So after the report comes the autopsy. Not everybody who passes away gets an autopsy. The decision is made between the coroner and the forensic pathologist. We have 2 forensic pathologists on contract. They are board certified, so they are physicians, and then they're board certified forensic pathologists, which is additional training and rotation at the hospital. So they're very, very well trained, and to do autopsies on criminal cases and to be able to testify in court, you have to be board certified. So they decide, together we decide whether there'll be an autopsy. And final is a toxicology, where we draw your blood. Everybody who comes in, we draw the blood, gets sent to the WSP State Crime Lab, and that will tell us exactly what level of any substance may be in your system. Right down to, basically comes back nanograms per milligrams. So then, let's say it comes back at a dose of amphetamine or this, we can check the chart to see is that a regular normal dose, is that a lethal dose, or is that obviously an incredibly lethal dose. So a lot of times with your prescription drug overdoses, there's that fine line. Is this a suicide or was it an accidental ingestion? And basically you look at the levels, and a lot of folks who are on oxycodone and hydrocodone for years and years and years build up a tolerance. So 2 a day used to help them. Now it takes 6 a day. Then it takes 8 a day. And that's some dangerous stuff. Those are some highly addictive medications. One woman came in and complained back in Las Vegas that her husband hadn't committed suicide.